Have you ever watched someone get dismissed in 3 seconds flat? Not because of what they said, but because of how they looked. That's what happened on a Tuesday morning in September at Whitmore Associates, one of the most profitable private equity firms in Atlanta. And I need to tell you this story because what happened next changed everything. The lobby smelled like money. Marble floors, leather chairs, a chandelier that probably cost more than most people's cars. The receptionist, a young woman named Brittany Cook, 24, brunette, wearing a blazer that matched the firm's navy logo, was on her third coffee of the morning when the elevator doors opened. A woman walked out. She looked maybe 60, maybe older. Hard to tell. She was short, barely 5'2". Her coat was beige, the kind you buy at a department store and wear for 20 years because it still does the job. Her shoes were flat, sensible. She carried a paper bag from a diner 2 blocks down, the kind of place where refills are free and the booths have duct tape on the seats. Her hair was silver, pulled back with a plain elastic band, no jewelry except a thin gold band on her left hand, no briefcase, no laptop, no rolling suitcase. She walked up to the reception desk and smiled. "Good morning. I have a 9 o'clock. Brittany looked up from her screen, looked at the woman, looked back at her screen. Name? Delia Foss. Brittany scrolled, frowned, scrolled again. "I'm not seeing a... Oh." She paused. "Delia Foss? That's right." Brittany's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. A small recalibration. She picked up the phone. "I'll let them know you're here." Delia Foss nodded, set her paper bag on the edge of the desk, and pulled out a small container of oatmeal. She started eating. Standing right there in the lobby, Brittany stared at her for exactly 1 second, then looked away. Let me tell you about Whitmore Associates before we go any further, because understanding the room matters. The firm had been founded in 1987 by a man named Gerald Whitmore, a tall, silver-haired Atlantan who believed that private equity was an art form, not a business. He had built the firm over 30 years into something formidable. Pension funds, real estate portfolios, technology acquisitions, $32 billion under management at its peak. Gerald had retired 5 years ago, handing the reins to his son, Bentley Whitmore. Bentley Whitmore was 41. He had his father's name and his father's hair, but not his father's instincts. He had gone to Wharton on his father's connections. He had joined the firm on his father's invitation. He had learned to talk the way powerful men talk, slowly, with long pauses, as if every word he spoke was being transcribed for a textbook. His suits were made in London. His watch was Swiss. He called everyone friend. Bentley had made one serious mistake in his 4 years as managing partner. He had bet heavily on a logistics company called Meridian Freight, convinced it was undervalued. He had pushed the board to commit $400 million. Meridian had collapsed 8 months later, taking the investment with it. The firm had absorbed the loss, barely, but the cracks were showing. 2 senior partners had quit. A major pension fund had withdrawn. The board was restless. So when the firm put out a quiet call for a turnaround consultant, someone who could come in, assess the damage, and chart a path forward, they expected someone who looked the part. An expensive suit, a firm handshake, a name that showed up in Forbes. They did not expect Delia Foss. Delia was 63 years old, African-American, 5'2", and had spent most of her career doing exactly what nobody asked her to do in rooms exactly like this one. She had grown up in Decatur, Georgia, the daughter of a school bus driver and a seamstress. She had put herself through Georgia State working nights at a hospital. She had spent 11 years at a consulting firm no one famous had ever heard of, fixing companies that bigger consultants had given up on. Then she had gone independent. No partners, no website, no press. She worked by referral only. And the referral that had brought her here had come from someone very specific. James Okoro, the managing director of the pension fund that had just pulled out of Whitmore Associates. He had watched her save a manufacturing company in Birmingham that 3 other firms had declared unsalvageable. He had called Bentley personally. "Just meet with her," he'd said. Bentley had agreed, mostly to get James off his back. He had assumed the meeting would take 30 minutes. He would listen politely. He would say he'd be in touch. He would not be in touch. That was the plan. Delia finished her oatmeal, tucked the container back in her bag, and followed Brittany to the elevators. The conference room on the 14th floor was glass on 3 sides. You could see all of Midtown Atlanta from up there. The table seated 20. There were 6 people already in the room when Delia walked in. Bentley Whitmore sat at the head. To his right, his chief operating officer, a compact man named Russell Creed, 47, who had the look of someone who had been managing his temper for decades. To Bentley's left, the firm's head of legal, a woman named Patricia Ng, 44, reading something on her tablet without looking up. 3 junior analysts sat farther down the table with laptops open. Delia walked in, set her paper bag on an empty chair, and sat down. There was a pause. Bentley looked at the bag. "Can we get you something?" he asked. "Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you." Delia folded her hands on the table. "Should we start?" Another pause, longer this time. Bentley had expected a PowerPoint, maybe a bound presentation. At minimum, a leather portfolio. "Of course," he said. "So, Delia, James speaks very highly of you. Tell us a little about your background. I sent my background ahead of time." Right, of course. But in your own words, Mr. Whitmore." Her voice was gentle, not sharp, not impatient, just quiet and direct, the way someone speaks when they've learned that volume is not the same thing as authority. "I've read your firm's last 4 quarterly reports, your Meridian acquisition documents, the post-mortem analysis your own team prepared, and the withdrawal letter from the Cornerstone Pension Fund. I've also looked at 11 comparable firms that experienced similar loss events over the last 15 years. I know what happened here, and I have a sense of what needs to happen next. I didn't come to introduce myself. I came to work." The room was very quiet. Russell Creed leaned back in his chair. His expression hadn't changed, but his eyes had. Patricia Ng set down her tablet. Bentley smiled, the kind of smile that men use when they don't know what else to do with their face. "All right," he said. "Let's work." What happened in the next 4 hours, I'll summarize this way. Delia Foss did not use a laptop. She did not use slides. She had a legal pad and a pen, and she wrote on it in small, precise handwriting. She asked questions. Long ones, short ones. Questions that made Russell Creed shift in his seat and made the junior analysts look at each other sideways. She asked why the Meridian deal had been sourced internally rather than through an independent diligence process. She asked who had signed off on the secondary valuation. She asked why the loss reserve had been categorized the way it had in the Q3 report. She asked about a line item in the operating expenses that no one seemed to be able to explain cleanly. And then she stopped asking and started talking. Quietly, without drama. She laid out what she saw, the structural problem, not just the bad deal. The firm had a culture of deference. Junior analysts had flagged concerns about Meridian 6 months before the collapse. Those concerns had been softened in the written reports, then softened again before they reached the partners. By the time Bentley had seen the numbers, they told a story that was more comfortable than true. Bentley's jaw tightened as she spoke. "That's a significant claim," he said. "It's not a claim. It's in the documents." She slid 3 pages across the table, printed, not emailed. She had brought them with her. The same analyst flag appears in 3 separate internal memos. Different language each time, getting quieter each time. That's not incompetence. That's a system that penalizes honesty. Silence. Russell Creed picked up one of the pages. "Read it." "Set it down. She's not wrong," he said quietly. Bentley looked at him. "She's not wrong." Russell said again, louder this time. What happened next surprised everyone in the room except Delia. Bentley Whitmore stood up, walked to the window, and looked at Atlanta for a long time without saying anything. The junior analysts were motionless. Patricia Ng was watching him. Then he turned around. "What would you do?" he asked. "If it were yours to fix, what would you do?" And Delia Foss told him. She spoke for 45 minutes without notes. She talked about process redesign and cultural accountability. She talked about how to rebuild trust with institutional investors without overselling the recovery. She talked about what to keep, what to restructure, and this was the part that made Russell Creed sit forward, what to cut. There was one more person in the room who hadn't spoken yet. At the far end of the table, half hidden behind an open laptop, sat a young man named Spencer Whitmore, 26. Bentley's younger cousin. He had joined the firm 6 months ago in an analyst role, though his responsibilities were never entirely clear to anyone. He was wearing a quarter-zip pullover at a meeting like this, which told you something. Spencer had been watching Delia the way someone watches a bird that has flown into their house, confused, slightly annoyed, waiting for it to leave. When Delia finished, Spencer spoke. "No offense," he said, leaning back, arms crossed, "but everything you just said is pretty standard to turnaround doctrine. I learned this stuff in my second year at Darden. What exactly makes you the right person for something this size? What's your biggest deal?" The room went still, the kind of still that happens when someone says something that can't be unsaid. Bentley looked at Spencer. Something moved behind his eyes, not quite embarrassment, closer to dread. Delia looked at Spencer Whitmore the way she had probably looked at many Spencers in many rooms, calm, no flinch, no flush of anger. She just waited one beat, the way someone waits for a cloud to pass, then answered. Corvin Industrial, 2009, 11 plants, 7 states, $1.4 billion in debt, 8,400 employees. Took 22 months, saved roughly 6,000 jobs. The other 2,400, I wish I could have done better. That's still with me. She paused. Before that, Halstead Regional Health in Savannah. They were 2 quarters from insolvency. Before that, a municipal utility in Ohio that had been mismanaged for 9 years. I could keep going, but I don't think that's what you're actually asking me. Spencer blinked. What am I actually asking you? You're asking why someone who looks like me is sitting at this table. She said it without heat, as a simple observation. And the answer is, because James Okoro called your cousin, and your cousin said yes, and here I am. Spencer's face went red. He started to say something. Bentley cut him off. Spencer. His voice was flat. That's enough. Spencer closed his laptop and said nothing else for the rest of the meeting. But the meeting wasn't over, not even close, because what Spencer's question had done, without meaning to, was open a door. And through that door walked something Delia had expected from the moment she'd stepped off that elevator. Resistance. Not from Bentley, he was shaken, but he was listening. Not from Russell or Patricia. From the parts of the firm that hadn't been in the room. By Thursday of that week, word had spread. Whitmore Associates was bringing in a consultant. An outside consultant. A woman. An older woman. Someone no one had heard of. Someone who had shown up to the 14th floor with oatmeal in a paper bag. The senior partners, 3 men who had been with the firm for over a decade, requested a meeting of their own. Their names were Aldous Hatch, Fletcher Barrow, and Kingsley Drum. Aldous was 58, gray temples, had a golf handicap he mentioned in professional conversations. Fletcher was 61, handled the real estate portfolio, and wore his credentials the way some people wear expensive cologne. Constantly, and in your face. Kingsley was 54, and said the least of the 3, which somehow made him feel like the most dangerous. They sat across from Delia in a smaller conference room. No glass walls, no view. A power move. Delia noticed. She didn't mention it. Aldous started. "We want to be clear that we support this process," he said, in the tone of someone who does not support this process. "We just want to understand the scope, the timeline, and frankly, the qualifications. You've seen my files," Delia said. "We've seen a file. It lists projects but not clients. It lists outcomes but not methodologies. It's thin, Delia. Ems Foss," she said. Aldous blinked. "I'm sorry? Ems Foss." "You called me Delia. We haven't met before today." She folded her hands. "I don't mind the question about scope. That's fair. The question about qualifications coming now, after the fact, that's different. Bentley brought me in. If you have concerns about his judgment, that's a conversation for the board, not this room." Silence. Fletcher cut in. "No one is questioning Bentley's judgment. We're questioning the fit. This firm is Losing clients, Delia said. I know. That's why I'm here. Kingsley Drum, who had said nothing until that moment, spoke. His voice was quiet, measured. What exactly do you think you'll find that we haven't already seen? Honestly? Delia looked at him directly. I think I'll find things you've seen and decided not to say out loud. That's usually how it works. Kingsley stared at her for a long moment. Then something happened that neither Aldous nor Fletcher expected. Kingsley Drum nodded. One slow nod. Fair enough, he said. It wasn't an endorsement, but it was a crack in the wall, and Delia Foss had built a career on cracks in walls. The next 6 weeks were not a movie montage. They were grinding, difficult, unglamorous work. Delia reviewed files, conducted one-on-one interviews with staff at every level, and spent 2 full days with the junior analysts, the ones nobody ever asked, listening to everything they hadn't put in the reports. She ate lunch at her desk, turkey sandwich from the same Nevada. She didn't go to the dinners Bentley hosted for potential investors. She didn't attend the charity event that the firm co-sponsored in October. She was there to work, not to be seen. Spencer Whitmore avoided her. When they passed in the hall, he looked at his phone. She didn't take it personally. She had learned a long time ago that the Spencers of the world eventually had to reckon with results. Not with her. With results. 3 things happened in week 5 that changed the direction of everything. First, Delia found the second problem. It wasn't in the Meridian collapse. It was older than that, a pattern in the real estate portfolio that Fletcher Barrow managed. A series of related party transactions that had been structured in a way that was technically legal, but had created hidden exposure the firm hadn't fully accounted for. The number wasn't catastrophic on its own. Combined with the Meridian loss, it was serious. She brought it to Bentley privately on a Wednesday evening when the floor was mostly empty. She laid the pages on his desk. He read them, slowly. Fletcher has been with us for 17 years, he said. I know. This could end his career. I know, and it needs to be disclosed. Bentley stared at the pages for a long time. What if we restructure the exposure going forward and... No, she said it quietly. The way she said most things. If it comes out later, it's not an accounting issue anymore. It becomes something else, something much harder to come back from. He was quiet. You hired me to tell you the truth, she said. That's the truth. Second, Kingsley Drum came to find her, not the other way around. He showed up at her temporary office. She'd been given a small room near the copy machines that she suspected was a deliberate choice, knocked, and sat down without being asked. He slid a folder across the desk. I found this when we did the Meridian postmortem, he said. I didn't put it in the official report. She opened it. It was the same analyst flagging she'd identified, but 2 layers deeper. The original memo, unedited. The changes made before it went up the chain were tracked, line by line. Someone had gone through and softened the language. Replaced significant risk with area of monitoring. Replaced recommend immediate independent review with flagged for quarterly assessment. That someone was Russell Creed. Why are you bringing this to me? Delia asked. Because I've been at this firm for 12 years, Kingsley said, and I'd like to still be here in 12 more. He stood up. Do whatever you need to do with it. Third, James Okoro called. Not Bentley. Her. How's it going? He asked. It's going, she said. They treating you right? They're treating me exactly how I expected. He laughed low and knowing. The Cornerstone board meets in 3 weeks. They want to know if there's a reason to revisit the withdrawal. There might be, she said. Give me 10 days. She delivered the final report on a Friday morning. 16 pages, no padding. She presented it to the full partnership, all 6 partners, Bentley, Patricia Ing, Russell Creed, and 2 board observers. She started with the Meridian loss. She explained what had happened and how. She named the cultural failure by name, a system that rewarded agreement and penalized dissent. She proposed specific, structural changes to how investment decisions were reviewed, with independent oversight built in from the beginning, not tacked on at the end. Then she got to the real estate exposure. Fletcher Barrow's face went still when she put the slide up. She walked through the numbers without drama, the related party structure, the hidden exposure, what it meant, what needed to happen. Deplicris, she said, proactive, voluntary, and immediately, before anyone asks. Fletcher opened his mouth. I'm not finished, she said. She was not finished. She spoke for another 7 minutes about what proactive disclosure would actually accomplish, not just ethically, but strategically. How firms that got ahead of problems retained relationships. How firms that concealed problems until they were discovered did not. Then she got to Russell Creed. Russell Creed was 52 years old, had been at the firm for 9 years, and was, by every external measure, one of the most competent people in the building. He had also systematically softened reporting for at least 4 years, in a way that had created the conditions for the Meridian disaster. She put the tracked changes document on the screen. Russell looked at it. He didn't deny it. He just looked at the table. The COO role, Delia said, needs a structural reset. That's in the report. The specifics of personnel decisions are for the board. The room was very quiet. Bentley Whitmore spoke first. What do you think our chances are of actually rebuilding trust with institutional partners? Depends on what you do in the next 30 days, Delia said. If you move on the disclosure, restructure the review process, and demonstrate some accountability at the leadership level. Real accountability, not symbolic. I'd say your chances are reasonable. Not guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed, but you think it's possible. I've seen worse come back, she said. It wasn't a promise. But from Delia Foss, it was close. 3 days later, Spencer Whitmore knocked on the door of her temporary office. She looked up. He stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing the quarter zip this time. He looked somehow younger without it. Can I? He stopped. Tried again. I wanted to say something. Okay, what I said in that first meeting. The way I asked it. He paused. That was wrong. I knew it when I said it. She looked at him for a moment. Why did you say it then? He exhaled. Because you walked in with Oatmeal, and I made a decision about you before you opened your mouth. People usually do, she said, not unkindly. I'm sorry. She held his eyes for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. Thank you for saying it. He turned to go. Spencer's. He stopped. Learn to read the room before you speak in it, she said. Not for my sake, for yours. You'll need it. He nodded once and left. The Cornerstone Pension Fund reopened discussions with Whitmore Associates 6 weeks after Delia submitted her report. James Okoro had made the call himself. The voluntary disclosure on the real estate exposure, he'd told his board, was the kind of thing you don't often see. It wasn't fixed yet, but it was honest. And honest was a place to start. Aldous Hatch retired 3 months later. The timing was his own, but no one thought the timing was coincidental. Russell Creed transitioned to a reduced advisory role. He did it quietly. He had enough self-awareness to understand what the alternative looked like. Fletcher Barrow stayed. The disclosure had been painful, but it had been handled. He spent the better part of a year rebuilding his relationships with counterparties one call at a time. He was, it turned out, genuinely good at the work when the shortcuts were taken away. Bentley Whitmore made one more call to Delia 6 months after the report. Not about business, not exactly. I want to ask you something, he said. All right. When you came in that first day, with the oatmeal, did you know how we were going to react? She was quiet for a moment. I had a sense, she said. Did it bother you? She thought about that. You know what bothers me, Mr. Whitmore? What bothers me is the analyst who wrote that original memo. The one who said significant risk and then watched it become ear of monitoring before it left her desk. She knew, and she had to decide whether knowing was worth saying out loud in a place that didn't want to hear it. Delia paused. That's the thing that stays with me, not the oatmeal. Bentley Whitmore was quiet for a long time. What happened to her? He asked. The analyst. She's still there, Delia said. I made sure of it, and she's been promoted. He let out a breath. Good, he said. Yes, she said. It is. And here's what I want you to sit with because I've been turning the story over in my mind since I first heard it. Delia Foss walked into that lobby with oatmeal in a paper bag and flat shoes and a coat she'd had for 20 years. And in about 30 seconds, every person in that building had already decided who she was, what she was worth. Whether she belonged, they were wrong. And she knew they were wrong. And she didn't waste a single word trying to convince them. She just did the work. That's the thing nobody tells you about real confidence. It's not loud. It's not expensive. It doesn't announce itself at the door. It walks in, sits down, and gets started. If you've ever been in a room where someone looked right through you, decided your value before you said a word, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. Because those stories matter. Every single one. And if this one meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded. The paper bag doesn't tell you anything about what's inside. I'll see you in the next one. Subscribe if you haven't. We're just getting started.